to The Book of Life, a show about Jewish books, music, film, and web. I'm Heidi Estrin. The Book of Life is a podcast service of the Feldman Library at Congregation B'nai Israel in Boca Raton, Florida. Additional support comes from the Association of Jewish Libraries. We've been waiting and waiting for American Girl to do a Jewish character, and they've finally done it. Jacqueline Dembar Greene has written a series of 6 books about Rebecca Rubin, a young girl living on the Lower East Side in the early 20th century. And, of course, as with all the American Girl historical characters, there is a character doll available, which I'll link to at bookoflifepodcast.com. Jacqueline's also got a new Rosh Hashanah picture book coming out through Carben. It's The Secret Shofar of Barcelona, and it's based on a Converso legend. I met up with Jacqueline to talk about her writing during Book Expo America 2009 in New York City.
I'm Jacqueline Dembar Greene, and I'm the author of 6 new books with American Girl. It's a new historical character. Her name is Rebecca Rubin, and the stories take place in 1914. And Rebecca is a first-generation American. Her parents and grandparents were Russian Jewish immigrants who came in the wave of immigration that began in the 1880s and stretched until about 1915. I also am the author this year of a picture book called The Secret Shofar of Barcelona. And that is also based on some history, and it's set in Barcelona in the 1500s. And it's a tale of a little boy who tries to help his father find a way for the Jews of Barcelona to hear the shofar for the first time without being discovered by the Inquisition.
I'm excited about the American Girl book because, American Girl has been around for such a long time and it's so popular, and this is really the first time that they've added a Jewish character.
Right.
So, do you know why they decided to do that at this time? Can you give some background?
I do know that they had a tremendous number of requests for many years. And I know that other authors of American Girl series would go around to do programs, and there would always be a question, when are you going to do a Jewish American Girl? So I'm sure that was part of it. I know they got a lot of letters and emails, but I think they had always planned to do something like that. They were just looking for the right setting, the right historical period. And while Rebecca is from a Jewish family, and that's a very significant part of the stories because that's who she is, by the same token, they were looking for a vehicle that would transcend just being for a Jewish audience,
right,
and would be able to give all readers a chance to see what it might have been like to be an immigrant in that time period, to live in a tenement on Orchard Street, to be from a Jewish family, see what the customs were, what the problems were, what their traditions were, and really care about the character rather than only feel that it was just for Jewish girls. But having grown up at a time in the 50s when there were no stories really about Jewish American girls, and never seeing myself reflected in a book, I know how special it is for a girl to read about a historical background that reflects her own history.
Right.
We've heard from so many people who say either my great-grandmother's name was Rebecca Rubin, that's happened, or they've said, this reflects exactly my family's history, and I'm so excited to share it with my daughter or my granddaughter, because this way she will really understand our family's history while reading about a character in a story. So it's just great.
Yeah, I think it's wonderful that it's becoming part of the American Girl series, because what you were talking about, that every reader should be able to relate, that's their talent. That's what they do, because they've got all these different ethnic characters.
Right, exactly.
And they appeal across the board. So it just fits right into that pattern.
Yeah.
But so it's interesting because this is not a character that you personally dreamed up. This was like an assignment. So was that very different to write in that way?
Well, it was very different than a lot of writing that I do, but I did create the character.
Okay.
And what American Girl did was they called me, my editor called, before she was my editor, out of the blue. I was quite surprised. And she had read a historical novel that I wrote several years ago called Out of Many Waters, which is set in 1654 and is based on the first group of Jews who settled in New Amsterdam, which is, of course, New York City.
Right.
And from that book, I think she had the idea that I might be able to write a historical series for them where there was a Jewish character, but at the same time it was part of American history rather than just Jewish American history. So the only direction they gave me at the beginning was that they were looking for something during the time of the wave of immigration that started in about 1880 and went through to about 1915. And I'm the one who decided on 1914. I partly did that because I saw that all the American Girl series, the year ends in a 4. I don't know why. I still don't know why, but I thought, well, they must like that, so maybe 1914. I thought that 1884 or even 1894 would be too soon because I wanted a family that had already come to America, had become at least partly assimilated, and had moved from the hardest part of their life, perhaps in the Orchard Street area, living in a crowded tenement, working in a sweatshop, and had moved ahead just a little bit so that I could show a background of what they had gone through, while at the same time showing that there was so much promise and opportunity in America. And in the story, I set it up as a pretty large family with 2 grandparents who are living in the upstairs flat, and they're still the most traditional in Rebecca's extended family. The grandparents still use mostly Yiddish, but they do speak English. And then her parents had both come over separately, and they had become a little more assimilated. They speak English pretty much all the time, and they have already started to adapt to American ways, in some cases in ways that they didn't really choose to do but felt they had to do. For example, her father has a shoe store on Rivington Street, and he explains to the grandparents that he must keep the store open on Saturday because that's when he has the most shoppers.
Right.
And he can't afford to close. So we're seeing a hint of that. And by setting the story a little bit later, gave me a chance to show that progression. Also, Rebecca and all her siblings are American born. They're the first generation Americans. So I could show them as the next generation that was really trying to balance being modern Americans. And for them, 1914 was very modern.
Right.
And at the same time, keeping their family's traditions. And they do keep kind of pushing the boundaries. And in some cases, the parents pull them back. And in other cases, the parents start to realize, and even the grandparents, that maybe some of these new American things are all right.
Right. So there are many, many kids' books set in the Lower East Side depicting Jewish families. This is kind of a common theme. And maybe that's why American Girl chose that setting, because it's so just totally typical. When you want to represent Jewish history, the first thing you think of is Lower East Side. Of course, there could have been many other choices, but I wanted to ask you 2 things, actually. One, I wanted to ask you what you thought about choosing that sort of uber-typical setting, and whether you thought there might have been any other setting that would have been a good representation of Jewish history, of American history. And then I also wanted to ask you, there are so many stories set in that time period and that place.
Right.
What sets this one apart?
Okay. Well, I haven't read all the others.
Right.
So I don't know if I can answer the second part of your question fully.
Okay.
But I'll start off by saying, once again, American Girl did not ask me to set it in the Lower East Side.
Oh, really? Okay.
That was my choice.
Okay.
And I actually toyed with setting it in Boston. And the reason was, as I was doing the background research about the immigrants coming through Ellis Island, I learned that at certain times when Ellis Island was so crowded that they simply couldn't handle another ship. Sometimes ships were made to wait offshore for 2 or 3 days or longer before they could even get closer to unload the immigrants. Sometimes they diverted the ship to Boston, and that's how a lot of Jewish immigrants came to Boston, and Italian immigrants. Of course, Boston had a huge Italian population. The whole North End is all Italian, and the West End was pretty much Jewish. And I thought about doing that. I really considered it very carefully and thought at first I would do that. But the more I read and the more I learned about it, the more I felt as though that would be showing something that was out of the ordinary. And I felt that for this time period and for this family that I was going to create, the most logical thing to have happened was they got off at Ellis Island and they stayed in New York. That's why the Lower East Side came to be with all the tenements.
Right.
It wasn't just Jewish, it was also, Greek and Italian. So I just felt that it needed to be New York City. And it just felt like the right spot. So now I think that one of the things that sets these books apart is the fact that there are 6 of them. And they follow Rebecca in a full year of her life. So the first book starts when she's 9, and she's just getting ready to begin 3rd grade. She goes to PS 64. And we actually went and visited that school. It's a community center now, but we got to go inside and see it.
Cool.
And the following books follow her through. In book 4, she turns 10. And by book 6, it's the end of summer, just before she's starting school for 4th grade. So she's 10, and it follows her for a year. So that's a little different. And she has a pretty large family. She has 4 siblings. She's feeling like she's kind of stuck in the middle. She has older sisters who are in high school, and they're twins, Sadie and Sophie. And of course, she thinks they get to do everything, and she gets to do nothing. And then she has an older brother, Victor, who's just ready for his bar mitzvah, and he's getting a lot of attention. And then she has a younger brother, Benny, who's 5, and everybody thinks he's just too adorable for words. So she feels she gets ignored a lot. And one of the reasons I made her a rather dramatic character is I just thought that, what do you do when you think everybody ignores you? You're outgoing. You're personable. You're dramatic. You want to say, look at me. I exist. I'm here. Pay attention. And so it just seemed like the right family for her and the right spot for her. So I don't know if that's been done in the other books or what kind of families there are, but that's why I set her that way. Also, because of her Jewish background, I was able to work in some Jewish tenets. For example, the idea of Rachmanis, compassion. She's a very compassionate young lady. She really looks around and sees things that need to be addressed, and she cares about them. But at the same time, she's not a little angel running around doing good in the world. She's a typical 9-year-old girl who also wants to be sometimes the center of attention. Sometimes she simply wants something because she really wants it. And she's torn. Do I do this for myself, or do I give it up for somebody else or for something else? And that is not an easy decision for anybody to make at any stage of their life. while sometimes in hindsight it looks easy, in general it's not always so easy. And she's a little girl. She's learning. The same is true with the idea of Tikkun Olam, which figures very prominently in Book 6, where she hears about sweatshops and how people are trying to fight for better working conditions. But she's not sure she quite understands that, and she tells her cousin Anna, whose father and brother are working in a coat factory, that she doesn't think it could be that bad because her parents worked in a shoe factory. And her parents always laughed and said that they met in a shoe factory and that's why they were a perfect pair. So she thinks it couldn't have been that bad. My parents joke about it. But then she goes with Anna to bring dinner to her uncle and her cousin. And when she actually goes inside the factory and sees it for herself, she realizes that something has to be done. And she becomes involved inadvertently in a labor strike. And it's a little more edgy story where she's much more activist. But that's the last book when she's 10. And I hope that the 6 books show sort of an arc of her development from a girl who's a little more self-centered and a little more unsure of herself to a girl who starts to really find her place in the world and see what makes her feel good about what she can do and where she is in the world.
So once you do those 6 books about that one character, that character's done, right? They don't go back and revisit that character later on.
They have done mystery books on some of the historical characters, and that is something that will be probably considered for Rebecca.
So that's just like a standalone, sort of a spin-off thing about a known character.
And usually for the mystery books, the character is a little bit older still. So a girl who read the first 6 books and liked the character, but maybe by then is 11 years old, she might like the mysteries.
Okay.
And sometimes they do a best friend book and bring out a best friend character, and that would really be great if they would do that. I'm sure if girls ask for it, that's something that they would probably be looking into. I don't know when or how they make those decisions, but I would hope that they would ask me to write any other book about Rebecca.
So that would be like another kind of standalone spin-off about a friend of Rebecca's.
Yes.
Okay, that's interesting.
Yeah.
And then, of course, there's a doll, right?
Yes.
Yeah.
She's over there in the corner in the box.
So did you have any input on the doll? I know they always have like accessories and things like that.
I really didn't.
Okay.
One of the things that I did ask about was when the first book opens, Rebecca is playing with a matryoshka nesting doll from Russia that had been her mother's. And I was hoping they would have a nesting doll in the accessories.
Right.
But it turned out that because of very difficult product requirements and so forth, they were not able to do that.
That's too bad.
So, but I think a lot of girls are going to want one. So that was something. But no, I didn't really have any input to that, and I really didn't have any input to what the doll looked like either. Although once they designed the dress for her main outfit, they explained what she would be wearing, and I used that in the description in the first book. So she's wearing this burgundy tweed, which is a very Russian color. Russians love burgundy. And I got to describe the dress.
That's funny.
But they told me what it was going to look like. I didn't come up with it.
But it sounds like they really give you a lot of freedom.
Definitely. More than people realize.
My impression was that, they gave you an assignment and you just had to do it, but it sounds like they really gave you open...
They did.
Yeah.
They really did. And then there was a lot of back and forth. There was a whole team. There was an illustrator, a professional historian who works for American Girl in their research department, who helped with background research, who was invaluable and saved so much time and energy and was so knowledgeable and reliable and wonderful to work with.
So your family is Sephardic, and you've written obviously the Secret Shofar of Barcelona is Sephardic Jews in some of your past historical novels. So why did you make Rebecca Ashkenazi?
I really considered very strongly having her come from maybe a Greek family coming through Ellis Island and having a Sephardic family. In fact, at the Tenement Museum, one of the tours is the Confino family, which is a Sephardic family that actually lived in that building.
Oh, wow.
Yes, it's great. I've done that. I've done the Tenement Museum 3 separate times. And it's a wealth of information, and it's wonderful just to feel being there. It's just a great place. But I felt that as I did my research, just as in choosing New York City as the location for Rebecca's story, I also felt that the vast number of Jewish immigrants coming over were Eastern European Jews. And they had to get out of Russia, Poland. They just had to get out. And that was the vast majority. And so I felt that to really keep the story authentic and the time period authentic, it made the most sense to do a Russian Jewish family. So that's why I did it. But I did end up talking quite a bit to my father about his Russian Jewish family. And I really hadn't known very much about it because my mother's family was the dominant giant family, and everything, our foods were Sephardic, and our traditions were Sephardic, and our synagogue was Sephardic, and everything was done in Ladino. I grew up hearing Ladino as much as English. But my father's family was very small and scattered, and he was very happy to talk about the Russian background. And I was sorry I hadn't talked to him sooner. I would say to everybody that you should talk to your parents and your grandparents and your aunts and your uncles and get the family history. Get names and dates and places and addresses before everybody forgets. And then get the stories. Why did you leave? What made you come to America? Did you go somewhere else first? How did you get out? They forget those stories. They really do. Tape them, video them, get it in their words. Because the longer you wait, the more stories are forgotten. And pretty soon, people have different stories and you don't know which one is the right story, or they don't remember it at all. So history, family history is so important, and you never want to lose it. I would say for Jewish people particularly, and anybody who's a child of immigrant families, just like almost everybody in America, unless you're Native American, it's harder for us to keep track of our family ancestry. We have exchange students from France all the time, and they could trace their family history back to the 1600s.
Wow.
In the same area, in the same town, in the church records, and they knew everything. But we don't have that. We're the nomads. We went from here to there to somewhere else. And at every change, we lose something of the history record. So get what you can now and don't wait.
And it's interesting as you say that because, you know, for us as adults, we knew immigrant generations, and today's children mostly do not. You know, their parents and their grandparents are often very assimilated Americans, but at the same time, there's still a lot of moving around going on, just even within North America.
There is.
You still want to record what you can.
Right now, we have had a huge influx of Russian Jews in America. In the last 10, 15 years, huge influx. I can go to Brookline, Massachusetts, and it's Little Russia, you know.
Right.
So
well, that's true, of course. I mean, there's always new immigrants coming.
That's
but
right.
I guess I was thinking in terms of, you know, the Rebecca Rubin story and the people whose families immigrated at that point and now they're assimilated Americans. You know, if you say talk to your grandparents, those grandparents aren't the Yiddish-speaking immigrants. They're American. But it doesn't mean you don't want their story just because they're not the ones who came across the sea. Yeah.
Well, I think one of the things about these books that will give them a wider appeal is that immigration is such a huge issue today. And I think for readers going through these books, they're going to have a different feeling and a different idea of what it's like to be a new immigrant.
Do you want to talk a little bit more about the Secret Shofar book?
Yes, I'd love to. That was a book that's done by Carben Publishing, and they contacted me also. This is a very nice spot to be in when you're a writer.
Right, when they're calling you.
Yes, it's wonderful. I had done previous books with Carben. They did my very first book, which was called Butchers and Bakers, Rabbis and Kings. And I think that was maybe 1980. It's a long time ago. And I got a call from an editor there who said that she had gone to a Rosh Hashanah service, and one of the sermons was about someone that they thought was a real person named Don Fernando Aguilar, who lived in Barcelona and was the conductor of the Royal Orchestra of Barcelona. And that he had found a way to have the shofar played during a concert without the Inquisition realizing what it was.
Right.
And that it was the first time that the Jews had been able to hear the shofar, and it was a representation of someone being very courageous to preserve a cultural and religious tradition. So they said, if you're interested in this story, we don't know if it's really true or not or where it came from, but if you see what you can find, we'd love to do a picture book about this. Mm-hmm. So I started doing research on Barcelona. There was no Royal Orchestra of Barcelona. There was no Don Fernando Aguilar. But I was actually happy because I got a lot of historical information in my research, and then I was free to pretty much create the story the way I wanted to tell it, because I didn't have to rely on something that was true.
So it's not a historical retelling, it turns out. It's like is it a legend, basically, or is it just fiction?
Nobody knows where it came from. It was on a rabbinical listserv. And even the rabbis who picked it up don't know where it came from, because I contacted several rabbis who had used it, and nobody knew.
So it's just sort of an urban legend.
It's something that just, spontaneously happened. So I created a little boy named Raphael, and his father is the conductor of an orchestra in Barcelona. And the father comes up with a plan to have a concert on the night of Rosh Hashanah, because he knows when they do a concert there will be a big festival and everyone will be celebrating in the streets and having special events, and the Jews can gather at each other's homes to secretly pray and have a festive Rosh Hashanah dinner without anyone suspecting that they're celebrating a holiday, a religious holiday, and they'll be safe from the Inquisition. And at the same time, he composes a new piece, and he uses native instruments from the New World that Columbus had recently discovered. His son, Raphael, looks at some of the new instruments that his father has put together, deer toe rattles and a rain stick, and says to his father, "What about the shofar?" And his father says, "The Jews of Barcelona have longed to hear it, but it's too risky. I could never ask anyone to do that." And the son says, "You give me a shofar, I will learn to play it, and I will do it." And so he goes out to the pastures, and he starts practicing with the shofar, and the first sounds are just horrible. It's just flat. He can't get a sound out of it. But he keeps practicing. And pretty soon, the notes that his father hummed to him, Tekiah, Teruah, he gets it. And he can play it. And he goes to the concert, and he steps on stage, and there is the Duke, who's in charge of the city. Members of the Inquisition are right in front of him, and he's very concerned about what will happen if they realize what instrument he's really playing. But he steps forward and he plays it, and the ending is sort of a surprise what happens. But that's the story that I created for them. And the illustrator did a beautiful job. His name is Doug Chaka. They're soft, warm colors, golds and reds and browns, and they're just beautiful pictures. I was really excited to see them. I was in Barcelona. I took photographs that I sent to the illustrator of the palace and the alleyways and the courtyards. And while I was there, I went to the synagogue in Barcelona, which is very small, and they're trying to reconstruct themselves congregationally as well as in the building. Right now they're meeting about once a month. They were so excited about having a piece of the history of Barcelona's Jews, even though they had never heard of the story either. But the idea that the story of secret Jews in Barcelona would be part of the literature, so they were really excited about it. That was a very thrilling moment.
Yeah, will they publish a translation and sell it in Spain, I wonder?
I don't know. It's something probably that I should ask Carben about.
Seems like there'd be interest.
But they said that they would carry it in English in their gift shop.
Oh, neat.
Because they have so many tourists.
Oh, what a good idea. Yeah.
So I hope it'll be there. And they said they really didn't have anything that was particular to Barcelona. So they were really excited about it. It feels so good to be part of something new like that.
Excellent. Well, thank you very much.
Thank you.
There are so many ways to connect with the Book of Life. Fan us at facebook.com/Book of Life Podcast. Follow us at twitter.com/Book of Life Pod. Email us at boooflifepodcast@gmail.com and listen to the latest episode by phone at 916-313-3820. And of course, find links to everything at bookoflifepodcast.com. The Book of Life is a podcast service of the Feldman Library at Congregation B'nai Israel in Boca Raton, Florida at cbiboca.org and is supported in part by the Association of Jewish Libraries at jewishlibraries.org. Our background music is provided by the Freilachmakers Klezmer String Band at freilachmakers.com. Thanks for listening and happy reading.